Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Brendan Hufford, thank you for joining me, man. I wanted to start off by just kind of telling you sort of what your, I don't know if you want to call them emails, educational emails, a course. It's like really tough to sort of pin down what it is that you do. But just the idea for me is that like in 2013, I was working at a PR firm in Manhattan. And I was doing all kinds of work for these big corporations. And I kept hearing this thing called SEO, right? But when I asked people like to explain it further, like tactically, they didn't know anything. Like they were just completely full of it. It's like, it was like a buzzword. The interns did it. Like it was kind of treated like social media was back in the day, where people didn't really see the value. Like they did and they didn't. There was hype around it, but like no company really wanted to invest in it. So long story short, I ended up raising money and we sold a movie. Like when I was in film school, we raised 80,000 and another 10, so 90,000, and we sold a movie to Lifetime. Then we went to AFM, which is the American film market. And I started to see the future of independent films. And I didn't really think that there was a viable future for me money-wise in that industry. So I backed away from it and came back around to SEO because I was like, video production, when I do a video for somebody, as soon as it's over, I got to go find a new job. So with SEO, at least the work remains so I can get a monthly retainer. So I did a lot of research with Moz, and you know, when you first do SEO, you're getting hit with like robots.txt and redirects, and it's like, hold on, dude. I'm like a content guy, a video production guy. You're hitting me with so much stuff right now. And with you, when I read your stuff, it took me back to like the fundamentals, I think. So for me, when I read your work, instead of looking at SEO as how do I get on the first page of Google, I looked at it as how can I figure out all of my target customers' pain points? How do I become a freaking hawk and go any online, ask people, figure out all of the pain points, and then address them? Instead of thinking of like, all right, bro, how do I write a sick meta title to get on the first? Like, put that aside. Like, it's not about that. It's about solving customer pain points. So as soon as I finished, I did 30 emails. So you did like 30 days. You sent me like an email every day for 30 days, which by the way was huge because SEO can be overwhelming. And I think 2,000 plus word posts for most people is just, it's not a good thing. So for you, you were sending me these bite-sized nuggets every single day so that by the time the sequence of your emails was over, I was able to internalize the information much better than the 5,000 hours of crap that I read prior. And it's not crap. You know, Moz is great, Ahrefs is great, but I'm just saying not everybody needs this like all-encompassing ultimate guide for everything, right? So immediately when I finished your emails, the next client that I got, I pushed him to the first page of Google. And what I did tactically was, so he was a ductwork installer. I went to work with him. So I watched him work at the shop. I asked him a crazy amount of questions. So like I pulled out my podcast stuff, my microphones, and recorded an hour and a half conversation with him. And I had all my questions lined up, and then I transcribed them. So anything he told me, I could look back on it. So there was no confusion. I never had to call him back and be like, hey, bro, what about this or what about that? And just going on job sites with him and actually learning his craft before I did anything, before I touched a keyboard. You know what I mean? Before I jumped into keyword research, like, no, you don't start with keyword research, bro. You start with understanding the industry, understanding their customers. And that's what you helped me with is like what you teach is so important for SEO because it's not about ranking on the first page of Google. It's like Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the richest guy, but he wasn't like, yo, in 1994, he wasn't saying that he was going to be the richest guy. He had a strategy. The byproduct is, yes, you become the richest guy. But like thinking that you're going to do something to rank number one on Google, it's a fool's errand. Because number one, you really don't even, Google can do whatever it wants to you. Like you could be on the third page and just like, I don't really know. Like, so address it from a pain point standpoint, because you're probably not going to rank for a while, especially if you're a new site or a new company, right?
Mhm.
So if you do the SEO, what you advise, and do the research and figure out customer pain points, by the time when people come to your site, your conversion rate will be much, much higher. So I didn't even think, when you taught me your Mojo, I didn't think about ranking on the first page. I thought about, like, if I can only get 20 people to my website every month, will I be able to address their pain points and be able to speak to them directly when they enter versus like, I'm going to rank first. So that was my spiel. Sorry that I went on that rant, but it's just important because there's so much garbage advice out there about SEO. And I think you demystified it and like cut the crap.
I appreciate that. That's really the goal. That's why SEO for the rest of us got started. I'd been doing it for a while. I want to address one thing you said. I think a lot of times we look at email subscribers or traffic as like the end in itself, and it's wrong, because traffic is a cost, right? You have to pay for servers. The more traffic you get, the more that costs, right? You have to pay to maintain your email list. The more subscribers you get, the more it costs. The goal is not to rack up, I understand list growth and traffic growth have effects down a pipeline, right? But the goal can't just be to grow those top line numbers. People are like, hey, how many email subscribers do you have? Why? Why don't you ask me about my revenue? Why don't you ask me about like how many people have joined, and then how many people are actually successful, right? Like that sort of thing, right? How many people do I have like yourself that'll kick off a conversation with something like that? That's the goal. That's the actual end versus what people think is the end, which is just rank number one. It's just a marketing channel, right?
And it's also why I can't take anyone seriously who says that SEO is dead. Because let's put it aside and say that you never rank on the first page of Google. Why would you not research your target customers? Why would you not research the words and phrases that they're using? So like, I know it's kind of, I'm hearing a lot of marketers say SEO is dead. And quite frankly, if you're one of those marketers listening, I can't take you seriously. Like, no disrespect, I can't take you seriously. Because SEO is more than ranking on Google. It's about researching and understanding your customer. So that's my 2 cents on that.
It's the same. You're absolutely right. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as people who are like, so when Facebook went to 1% organic reach and whatever else, and Twitter's gotten super noisy, and Instagram or whatever, people are like, well, social media is dead. Organic social media is dead. It's not. You're just probably not very good at it. And then it's the same things that make you good. The way I think about SEO, right? The way we think about it, it's the same thing that makes you good at copywriting. It's the same thing that makes you good at social media. Just makes you a really good marketer because you're willing to dive deep enough to understand not just what people want in terms of information, but actually how to like give them that transformation that they want, how to move them to the solution that they want, but maybe they don't know exists yet, or maybe they're not sure if it's for them.
So Brendan Hufford, let me jump into some questions with you. And the first one is, now that we're in this COVID era, and it's pretty clear that this is not going anywhere. And the thing is that's been bothering me is the websites, particularly agencies, whose copy is not reflecting the change, and they're trying to act like there's puppies and we're just not going to acknowledge that the economy is tanking, like in a way that we have literally never seen before. So my question to you is, I'm seeing a lot of small business owners, they're struggling right now, right? And it's really important for me to try to keep the dream alive because that's who I work with, as small business owners. So my question to you is, if you were a small business owner right now trying to approach SEO from scratch, sort of how would you go about that? And keep in mind that they might not have 2 years to get that going. And I know that's kind of a tough spot for me to ask you that, but is there a way for the small business owner to accelerate their growth with SEO in a manner that's not going to take till 2022?
Good question. So I think in terms of addressing it, I just want to touch on this. I've seen some agencies and some places address it in a really sketchy way, right? Like I've seen people whose homepages say like, get your COVID proposal. And I'm like, would you say like, get your September 11th proposal?
Oh,
You
man.
know, do you
Yeah.
say like get your domestic violence proposal? Like, this is a horrible tragedy. This is a terrible thing. Please don't use it as like an adjective to put before proposal. Like, I get what they're trying to say, but the better way to say it, and I'm not going to take any credit for this, this came from my CEO at Directive. He said, you know, why don't we change our headline on our homepage? We work mainly with software companies, right? And they have MQLs, marketing qualified leads. And our homepage now just says, never miss an MQL goal again. And it acknowledges you all probably missed your MQL goals, right? Like your lead goals that you had set for this last quarter, you probably didn't hit them. How do we help you never miss those again? Like, that addresses it, but in such a tasteful way. So I agree. Don't ignore it, but also don't address it like a goof. In terms of, let's talk about like SMBs, right? Let's talk about small businesses, especially small local businesses. There's a lot of, like, I came up working with a lot of wedding photographers, and they've just been crushed right now. And, you know, especially with weddings and events being canceled and rescheduled and everything. Part of it is figuring out where that gap is. Where's that open space, right? Can you see if there's, and you're going to have to be a little bit predictive of what people are searching for. No keyword tool is going to tell you that people are looking up like pandemic photo shoot. That's not going to show up in the tools for 2 or 3 months, and it's going to say the volume's real low, but people are looking for it. They're looking for like physically distanced photo shoots. They're looking for personal brand photography, something I still don't see enough photographers leaning into, right? Like, you still have skills and people need your skills. There are people with money out there. So I think that's a big part of it. I focus a lot when I think about SEO on discoverability. When somebody's looking for the things I do or can do I have a website or pages on my website that address that thing? So at least I'm in the running to be discoverable. And I think that's the biggest thing right now is, if you have time, look, like, you either have a lot of work to do because you're still really successful, or you have time and you can put some time into this. And if you don't have either, like, I'm going to say this lovingly because I've been there, your business is broken, right? Like, if you're both broke and working a ton, like as a business owner, there's some systems in there you can do better. And again, like, that comes from a place of love of like, I am in that issue most days for myself. With that said, I think like invest in that now, invest in content, invest in like figuring out what people need, and really understand that your like pages on your site are meant to push people to the next level of understanding, right? Like, if they're Googling their problems, great. They're not going to hide, like, let's say you're a plumber and somebody's looking like, maybe plumber is a bad example because it's so immediate, right? You don't need well, I'd love to have a plumber come out in 3 weeks, maybe sometimes, but most of the time it's like, I need a plumber now. There's water coming through the ceiling. But understanding that maybe somebody hiring you is not the first thing they need, right? They're just looking for how to, or they're looking for like why something is leaking or why something is falling down, you know? You know, there's bees, and this is like a real thing right now. There's bees in my bathroom, and I have no idea why. The windows are closed, but there are bees constantly in my bathroom. Why is that, right? And when I Google it, do you have content that addresses that if you're pest control? Things like that. It is hard. It is not going to turn into money overnight. If you need money overnight, like, it's what paid advertising exists for. It gets you in search engines first, instantly, and you can test. That's what I love. You can test what works and what doesn't, right? If copy doesn't work, it doesn't work. You can experiment with paid, see the headlines that are absolutely crushing in terms of clicks and conversions and sales, and then just take those headlines and put them on your homepage. So there's a lot of opportunity still, but I don't think you have to wait 2 years. You can invest now when a lot of people are hurting and be ready to be discoverable when things pick up, because they will eventually. Whether that's
and honestly, for me to jump in real quick, that's what I'm seeing with a lot of my clients, is that because of COVID, everybody's backed away. Mm-hmm. Because we've been aggressive. We've been able to move up in search in a pace that I think, if COVID didn't not that I want this to happen. I mean, I have to address that. This is absolutely the worst. But with that being said, we've been moving up in search at a rate that I know we wouldn't have been able to do if COVID didn't happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the same thing as stocks. It's the same thing as real estate, right? When the market is down, if you have the means, invest now. Don't get nervous, right? Like lean into it. And it might last a little longer than you want, but this is one of those things, especially with rankings and search. They're hard to get, but they're also easier to keep. I think that this is definitely the time to invest for sure.
What are the biggest mistakes that you see small businesses making with SEO? And I kind of want this to go to my small business peeps of just like, what do you say? And maybe it's not super obvious either.
Yep. The biggest mistakes they make is their content strategy involves using some sort of keyword tool, and then they do an export of it, or they do something in the tool and they sort the columns. They go, all right, lowest keyword difficulty, highest search volume, and we're just going to start knocking them out. Those don't drive business for you. If you have an hour to spend writing an article, you know, should we be writing this suit? Like, that's cool that it gets 47,000 searches per month and it looks like you can rank really easily, because keyword difficulty is a strange metric that doesn't take a lot of things into account. But you spend all this time creating this stuff that never turns into business. Whereas if I was going to invest in things, I would look at, you know, my core pages, my service pages. Do these actually convert? You know, do I have case studies? And, you know, this sounds silly. Local businesses very often suck at having photos of themselves doing their work. If you're a local business, people want to see where they're going. If you're a service provider, they want to see who's coming to their home. Like, they want to see you doing your thing. And if you have those photos and they're not, we all know what stock photos look like at this point. Like, have actual photos taken, you know, see if you can barter with a local, like this is one thing I love right now that I've seen a lot of businesses doing, getting help from other local businesses, building those ties, building those relationships, barter with some people, like barter with a local photographer to get those photos done and be like, hey, we can help you with this. This is what we do. We can help you with that thing. And then, you know, next time you need, call us, we'll take care of you. We need some photos for our website that look like we are extremely professional, right? There's local web designers that are struggling right now. You can get a new website designed, like, or whatever you need. We need some sort of test or somebody to set up my email list. I don't know, all these different things. My point is, I don't know what my point is, but other than there's just so much opportunity, as long as you don't make the mistake of chasing traffic and getting caught up in, like you had talked about, the minutia of things that don't move the needle. They're reading about SEO and they're getting caught up in the same things of like, oh, I need to optimize my robots file. And then they spend 3 days on it. And it's like that doesn't help anything. Or they're messing around with their Yoast plugin because it says it's an SEO plugin. So they're trying to figure that out. Doesn't help, right? Your better bet is to make sure you have that foundation in place, the content that's going to be discoverable when people are searching.
Right now, from a marketing standpoint, I guess you as a family man too, you could talk about this, but I probably want to keep it to marketing and SEO. But what has been your biggest challenge since COVID happened? Sort of, what is the thing where you're just like, man, this is really knocking my block off?
So the hardest thing I've noticed in terms of, let's touch on all three of them. The first one, I work here, I sleep there, I work out right there, I eat dinner over there. Everything happens in a very small space. And it's really, there's no real gap, right? I go to use the bathroom and stuff, and my kids are like, play with me. And I'm like a crappy dad because I'm still working. I just had to come out of my office for a minute. So that's difficult. As a marketer, it is difficult right now because it's hard to focus. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of constraints. It's hard to figure out a direction and commit with a lot of different things out there. And then in terms of like doing the craft of marketing, one of the things that's been most difficult right now is you end up, and I say this as somebody who goes to therapy, you end up playing therapist with your clients a lot of times, helping them like, okay, don't be so anxious. We'll figure this out. We'll get, if they're struggling, that's one thing. Maybe they're not struggling, but they're super nervous, or they're, let's throw all the money in the world at this. And you're like, hey, maybe actually slow down. Like I love the, love the hustle, but like hang out for a second. There's just so many emotions, and the already difficult part of relationships, there's just this cloud. There's these multiple clouds over those things that, can make things more difficult for sure.
Let's go into the Keanu Reeves round, because I know you got to get going in a few minutes. Keanu Reeves starred in the 1994 action hit Speed, and that's why I call it the Keanu Reeves round. So, Mr. Brendan Hufford, I'm going to say a person, place, or thing, and then you briefly tell me what comes to mind.
I'm here.
Online education.
I think it's the future. I think I think Ivy League schools and some colleges will double down on like the experience and the brand of things. But I think everybody else has realized that online education is the future. There's no reason to pay so much for college. And especially having my kids at home right now, and I say this also as a teacher for 10 years and an assistant principal for 2 of those, the societal function of school is babysitting, right? So people can work. It's fine. It's just what it is fundamentally. We're now realizing that, and we're realizing there's other options.
The future of SEO.
The future of SEO is multi-platform. It's understanding that there are multiple search engines out there, not just Google. We're in the middle of antitrust interviews and things in Congress right now, even though I feel like most of those interviews are like them asking Bezos how to plug in their printer or something, or they don't know how email works. It is still a thing that we're looking at, and like you said, Google can flip the switch whenever it wants. So it's understanding every platform as a search engine, as an answer engine, and really understanding how people search. That's how you win at Amazon. That's how you win at Quora, YouTube, Google, Pinterest. These are all search engines. You can win at all of them if you understand how people look for things.
Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis?
I mean, I feel like you've already made your allegiances known with your background.
Well, hey, this has nothing to do with my backdrop, man.
So I definitely Super Nintendo. My wife and kids and I were just looking at, we have a Nintendo Switch, and you can get like the online membership and get all the Super Nintendo and classic Nintendo games. So definitely Nintendo. Sweet.
Hey, Brendan Hufford, thank you for being on the Marketers with Attitudes podcast. I appreciate you for joining me, man. And thank you for the tutelage. I didn't pay anything. And I think what I can advocate for, though, is that, you charge now. And I think that it's well worth it, particularly because if I had found you early on, like back in 2013, it would have accelerated my growth. Because as much as I love Moz, as much as I love all these publications, they're writing for the nerdiest SEOs in the world. They are not writing for people who have just entered. And not only that, but like if you read that stuff for a while, it would be good to check out your stuff because it puts things back into perspective. Like you don't have to be a beginner to jive with your stuff. Like your stuff would be good for a dude that's like, hang on, like I think I need to go back from square one and like reevaluate this whole thing. So that's my 2 cents on it. Huff, thank you for joining me, man.